It was supposed to be a normal December day, like any other. The airport was bustling with travelers, the sound of footsteps echoing off the polished floors, the distant hum of conversation blending with the announcements overhead. Sarah had always loved the chaotic energy of airports, the excitement of journeys beginning, the promise of new destinations, and the thrill of discovery. But that day, something felt different. The air seemed thicker, heavier. Her chest was tight, like she couldn't breathe properly. She couldn't shake the nagging sensation that something was wrong. A feeling she couldn't explain. As she sat in the waiting area, her flight to New York was scheduled to depart in under an hour, yet she couldn't focus on the screen showing departure times. The small, neatly folded prayer card in her bag kept catching her eye. She had received it from her mother years ago, a simple card with the words, "Pray for your journey, and you'll find your way." It had always seemed like a kind gesture, but Sarah had never been one to follow the faith that came with it. Until now. She didn't know why, but the thought of praying before her flight had grown stronger with every passing second. Was it nerves? Anxiety? She couldn't tell. But it felt like more than that. A pull. A warning. The urgency in her heart grew. She dug through her bag, her hands shaking as she retrieved the small card. The weight of the moment settled over her. Something was pushing her to do this. Maybe it was just her mind playing tricks, trying to rationalize her fear. Or maybe, just maybe, there was something more to it. Something she wasn't prepared for. She had always been practical, logical, and never one to give in to superstition. But today was different. Today felt like a turning point, a moment she couldn't ignore. The words on the card, "Pray for your journey," seemed to echo in her mind. Without thinking twice, Sarah closed her eyes and whispered a quick prayer. "Please keep me safe. Please guide me." It wasn't long, nothing elaborate, just a simple plea for protection. As soon as she finished, she felt calmer. It was strange, but the sensation of dread she had been carrying seemed to lift, even if only for a brief moment. The world around her felt quieter now, almost surreal. She opened her eyes and scanned the waiting area. The large digital clock above the entrance to the gate showed that there were only 20 minutes left before her flight was scheduled to board. She quickly stood up, adjusting her jacket and shoulders as if to shake off the heaviness of her thoughts. Sarah didn't know why she was having these doubts. Everything had been fine. She had a solid job, a stable life. This trip was no different from any other business trip she'd taken in the past. A week of meetings, a few dinners, and then back home. But the unease wouldn't go away. As she walked toward the gate, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat, and she pulled it out quickly. It was a text from Emma, her best friend. The message was short, but the impact of the words was instant. "Don't get on that plane. It's not safe." Sarah froze. The buzzing in her hands seemed louder than the ambient noise of the airport. For a moment, she couldn't process it. She read the message again, hoping the words would change, but they didn't. Not safe. What did Emma mean by that? Her eyes darted nervously across the room, scanning for any hint of danger, but everything looked normal. Too normal. What was Emma talking about? She had to be overreacting, right? Emma was known for being a little too cautious, a little too worried about things that never happened. But this was different. Sarah couldn't shake the sense of urgency that began to grow inside her. She looked back at the gate, where the attendants were now starting to check boarding passes. Her flight was boarding. She was next in line. Sarah's mind raced. It could be nothing. It could be a simple misunderstanding, a mix-up in timing, or even an alarmist friend sending a message without thinking. But then again, what if it wasn't? What if something was wrong with the flight? What if she was about to get on a plane that wouldn't land safely? Her eyes scanned the crowd, looking for any sign of danger. People were boarding calmly, smiling, chatting with flight attendants. There was nothing unusual about the scene. Yet, the tightness in her chest returned, that sensation of something being off. Her fingers hovered over her phone, ready to type back, but no words seemed to come. She couldn't just ignore Emma's message. But what could she do? Sarah had a job to do, a responsibility she couldn't just abandon. This was a business trip. She had a team counting on her. Yet, her finger hovered over the "board now" sign. She looked at the attendant, ready to hand over her boarding pass, but something inside her was screaming to stop. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Emma. "Sarah, I'm serious. Please trust me. Don't get on that plane." This time, the words were more insistent, more forceful. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest. She glanced around the terminal again, but now, the tension was palpable. The air felt thick, heavy with some unseen weight. Could it be a warning of something more? Was Emma trying to tell her something she couldn't explain? Sarah's eyes locked onto the boarding gate once more. Something felt wrong. Her decision would come down to one simple choice. Would she follow her instincts and listen to Emma? Or would she board the flight and hope everything would be fine, like always? The attendants were getting impatient now, calling for final passengers to board. There was no more time to waste. The gate was closing in 5 minutes. But Sarah stood still, rooted to the floor, as her thoughts whirled around her. The decision to stay or go had never felt so impossible. Her breath hitched as she replayed the conversation from last night. Emma had mentioned something strange about the airline. She had been reading some reports, something about safety issues, but it all seemed so minor, just another rumor that wouldn't make sense. Until now. What if it was true? What if Sarah's life was at risk? She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of the decision. The seconds ticked away, each one louder than the last. With trembling hands, she scrolled through her phone again, looking for any other message from Emma. But there was nothing. The silence around her grew heavier, the bustle of the terminal fading as the moments stretched on. She couldn't explain it. But in that moment, Sarah knew something she couldn't ignore. Something wasn't right. She couldn't board this flight. The final call for boarding echoed through the terminal. Without another thought, Sarah spun on her heel and walked toward the exit. She didn't look back, not even once. The buzzing of her phone faded into the background. She wasn't sure where she was going or what she would do, but she knew she had made the right choice. It wasn't about logic or practicality anymore. It was about survival. The mysterious warning had been enough. She stepped outside the terminal and into the cold December air, unsure of what would come next. But one thing was clear. Her journey had just taken an unexpected turn, and it had nothing to do with the plane she was supposed to board. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped out of the airport, the cold December air hitting her face like a splash of water. The noise of the terminal was replaced by the distant hum of traffic, the occasional honk of a car, and the soft crunch of snow beneath her boots. She glanced behind her at the bright lights of the airport, the people still moving in and out, oblivious to her sudden, life-altering decision. The moment she'd walked away from that gate, everything had shifted. She pulled her phone out again, hoping to see another message from Emma, something that could explain the cryptic warning, give her some direction, but the screen was empty. No new messages. She frowned and started to scroll back through their previous conversation, searching for any clue, any detail that could help make sense of Emma's words. "Don't get on that plane. It's not safe." That was all Emma had said. And yet, it was enough to stop Sarah in her tracks, enough to force her to turn away from her flight and face an uncertain future. What if Emma was right? What if there was something more to this? Something beyond a mere gut feeling or coincidence. Sarah didn't know what to think anymore. She had made a choice to trust her instincts, to listen to a voice deep inside her that screamed danger. But was that the right choice? She walked towards the nearest bench outside the terminal and sat down, feeling the weight of the decision she had just made. People passed by, hurrying to catch their flights, all unaware of the inner turmoil she was facing. She was alone now, standing in the cold with nothing but the hum of the city to keep her company. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her, rubbing her hands together to fend off the chill. The minutes ticked by, but the more she thought about what had just happened, the more confused she became. She had left the airport, yes, but where was she supposed to go now? She wasn't just walking away from her flight, she was walking away from everything she had planned for the next few days, from her career, from her responsibilities. The thought weighed heavily on her mind. She had no backup plan. No other flight. No one to call. Emma, her only real friend in the world, was the reason she had left, but Emma had her own life, her own responsibilities. She couldn't just call her and expect answers. Emma was thousands of miles away, in another city, and the only contact they had was through text messages. But that didn't stop Sarah from reaching out again, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed out a message. Emma, what's going on? What did you mean by it's not safe? Please explain. She hit send and waited. Seconds ticked by. No response. Where was Emma? As Sarah stared at her phone, an unsettling feeling crept over her. Something about the situation was far bigger than she had anticipated. The simple text from her friend had set off a chain reaction, and now, she felt like she was trapped in a puzzle that didn't make any sense. The bustling sounds of the city filled her ears, but it felt distant, like she wasn't truly part of it. She had stepped out of her old life, and now she had to figure out what came next. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Emma. Sarah, I know you're scared. But I need you to trust me. I'll explain everything. There's a reason I told you not to board that flight. Please, just don't get on another one. Don't go anywhere. Just wait. I'll be there soon. The message was brief, but the urgency in it was unmistakable. The part about, I'll be there soon, made Sarah pause. Emma had said she would come to see her. Come to see her. Emma lived in a different state, hundreds of miles away. She couldn't just drop everything and fly to see her at the drop of a hat. This was starting to feel like something out of a thriller, something she wasn't ready to confront. What was Emma involved in? Sarah's thoughts were racing. She glanced down the street, noticing a black SUV pulling up to the curb, its windows tinted. The vehicle stopped, and for a moment, Sarah's eyes locked with the driver's through the darkened glass. Something about the moment felt wrong. Her pulse quickened. The SUV sat there for a few more seconds, then pulled away. Was she just being paranoid? She wasn't sure. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Then, her phone buzzed again. Stay where you are. Don't move. Trust me, Sarah. This is bigger than you think. There are people looking for you. Don't talk to anyone. Not even the police. Do not trust anyone but me. Her breath caught in her throat. People looking for her. The words hit her like a physical blow. What in the world was going on? She looked around, her mind racing with possibilities. She had no idea what Emma was talking about, but there was no denying the fear that had taken root deep within her. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her hands felt clammy. The world around her seemed to blur for a moment, the noise of the city fading away, leaving only her own thoughts. What had she gotten herself into? Without thinking, she shoved her phone into her bag, not wanting to read any more cryptic messages. She needed to clear her head, make sense of the chaos. She stood up abruptly, pacing in small circles. Every step felt like it was pulling her deeper into a web of confusion. She was almost ready to give up when her phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from Emma. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "We know what you did. Don't try to leave the city. You're not safe." Her heart skipped a beat. Who was this? The fear inside her escalated. She glanced around the street again, wondering if anyone was following her. Was this some kind of joke? It didn't feel like one. It felt far too real. She shoved her phone back into her bag, deciding she needed to get out of there, far away from this strange, threatening presence. She started walking down the street briskly, glancing behind her to check for any sign of danger. But she didn't see anyone. The minutes turned to hours. She kept walking, not knowing where she was headed, just moving forward. She passed store windows, brightly lit street signs, and groups of people chatting on their phones. The city felt the same as always, yet Sarah couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that she was being hunted. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Sarah found herself standing in front of a small diner. The neon sign flickered, but the warm glow of the lights inside felt like a refuge. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of coffee and grilled food filled the air. It was a comforting, ordinary place, exactly what Sarah needed at this moment. She made her way to a booth in the corner and sat down, breathing deeply. She needed time to process everything, to figure out what to do next. A waitress approached, smiling warmly. "What can I get you?" she asked, her tone friendly. "I just need a coffee," Sarah said, her voice almost too quiet to be heard. As the waitress walked away, Sarah glanced around the diner, hoping for some normalcy to return. But it never did. The weight of what she had just experienced, what she was about to uncover, pressed on her chest. Emma had warned her about something she couldn't understand, something much larger than herself. And the unknown people who were after her? They weren't part of the plan. The adventure, the mystery, the survival, this was only the beginning. And Sarah was no longer sure if she was prepared for what was coming next. Sarah stared at her half-empty coffee cup, the contents long gone cold. She had been sitting in the diner for what felt like hours, lost in her thoughts, trying to piece together the fragments of what had happened. Each message, each warning, only deepened the mystery. And yet, the more she tried to make sense of it, the further she felt from the truth. The diner was quiet now, just a few late-night patrons scattered around the room. The waitress who had served her earlier was cleaning up behind the counter. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound that filled the otherwise still air. But to Sarah, it felt like time itself was pressing in on her, suffocating her. She needed answers, but she didn't know where to find them. Her phone buzzed again, jolting her out of her thoughts. This time, it was from Emma. "Sarah, don't trust them. I'm on my way, but you need to get out of that diner. They're looking for you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had to leave. Now. She quickly grabbed her bag and slid out of the booth, her body tense as she scanned the room. No one seemed to notice her rush, but every instinct screamed that she was being watched. She hurried to the door, her footsteps quickening with every passing second. As soon as she stepped outside, the cold air hit her like a slap, but the sharpness of the chill was nothing compared to the fear building in her chest. The streets were still bustling with late-night traffic, but the sense of isolation weighed on Sarah. She kept her head low, avoiding eye contact with anyone, though she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching her every move. She turned a corner, seeking the quieter side streets. Where should she go? There was nowhere safe to hide, not here, not now. She had no choice but to keep moving, to stay one step ahead of whatever was closing in on her. The message from Emma still echoed in her mind, "They're looking for you." Who were they? And why was she being targeted? Emma had only given her cryptic messages, no concrete answers, no clear explanation of who these people were. It was as though the truth was buried beneath layers of deception, and Sarah had to dig through it all, no matter how painful the process might be. She walked faster, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Get to a hotel. Find a place to stay for the night. Figure it out in the morning. But the more she walked, the more her paranoia grew. Every passerby seemed like a potential threat. Every car that passed felt like it could be someone sent to find her. She couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped. Like there was nowhere she could go to escape the unseen danger that lurked just out of sight. Her phone buzzed again, and Sarah jumped, her heart pounding in her chest. It was Emma once more. "You're not alone. Trust no one, not even the people who seem friendly. Stay off your phone for a while. I'm almost there. Stay off your phone." It was the first time Emma had sounded so serious, so urgent. Sarah's fingers trembled as she looked down at her screen. But she had no choice. She had to respond, even if it meant putting herself at greater risk. "Where are you? What's happening? Who's looking for me?" She sent the message quickly, then, almost on instinct, slipped the phone into her jacket pocket. It felt safer to not be constantly checking, as though Emma's warnings were somehow protective in their own way. Keep moving. Keep quiet. As she walked further into the dark streets, she passed an alleyway where a figure stepped into view. The streetlight barely illuminated the man's face, but there was something about the way he moved, something deliberate, that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She couldn't make out his features, but he was staring straight at her. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't imagining it. He was watching her. Without thinking, Sarah took a sharp turn, stepping into the alley and trying to blend into the shadows. She pressed her back to the brick wall, holding her breath. She needed to stay out of sight. The man's footsteps echoed in the alley, slow and calculated. Sarah held her breath, praying that he wouldn't hear her. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her frantically beating heart. The sound of the footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a voice broke the silence. "Sarah," the voice called, low and steady. "I know you're there." She froze. How did he know her name? She hadn't told anyone where she was going. She hadn't spoken to anyone in the last few hours except Emma. The voice continued. "Come out. We're not here to hurt you. We're trying to help." Help? The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but there was no way she was trusting him. She stayed hidden, too afraid to move. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. The sound was deafening in the stillness of the alley. She fumbled for her phone, desperate to respond before the man noticed. But she didn't need to check it. Emma's words still burned in her mind. Trust no one. Not even the friendly ones. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, waiting. But Sarah knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. She had to move. She carefully backed away, trying to make as little noise as possible. The man's shadow was still visible in the dim light. She felt trapped, no way to escape without being seen. She needed a distraction. Suddenly, a car turned the corner, its headlights blinding. The man didn't seem to notice. This was her chance. She bolted. The man's shout rang out, but Sarah didn't stop. She ran with everything she had, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her legs burning from the effort. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She kept running, pushing through the darkness, her mind racing with questions. Who was that man? Why was he calling her by name? What was he going to do if he caught her? The city felt different now, like it was closing in on her. She had to get out, to find some kind of refuge before the mystery consumed her completely. Minutes later, Sarah found herself standing at the entrance to an underground metro station. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the dimly lit station. No one else was around. It felt eerily quiet. She walked down the steps to the platform and glanced around, looking for any sign of danger. The hum of the train tracks echoed in the distance, but it felt like the world was holding its breath. Her phone buzzed again. Sarah, I'm here. Where are you? It was Emma. Sarah typed out a quick response. Underground metro station. I need help. Please hurry. Her fingers were shaking as she sent the message. She stood there, her eyes darting to the tracks, waiting for the sound of the approaching train. A shadow passed by the entrance. It was too quick to be a person, but it made Sarah's blood run cold. She wasn't alone. Someone was here. And they were watching her. She turned to the tracks, but there was no train in sight. Was she being followed again? The sound of the train approaching was the only thing that kept Sarah grounded in the moment. Each step she took down the narrow corridor of the metro station echoed off the walls. Her breathing was shallow, quick, as she glanced nervously over her shoulder. Every shadow seemed like a potential threat, every distant sound too loud for comfort. She could still feel the cold sweat on her palms, the uncertainty hanging over her like a thick fog. Why was she being followed? The questions weighed on her mind, pulling her deeper into confusion. She had only wanted a quiet trip to the city, some time away from the pressures of her life. But now everything had spiraled into a nightmare. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Emma. Stay where you are. Don't move until I get there. Trust no one. It was the same message. Always the same. Trust no one. Sarah's hands trembled as she read it. Was Emma truly on her side? Was she just trying to protect her? Or was there more to Emma's cryptic warnings than Sarah could comprehend? She had to think. She had to stay calm. The train was still nowhere in sight, and the platform was eerily quiet. She had made it this far, and she wasn't about to let herself be caught now. She glanced up at the exit above her. Should she run? Or should she wait? But waiting was dangerous. There was something more at play here, and she couldn't afford to be a sitting duck. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, trying to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. The station had an unnerving quietness to it, almost as if the world outside had paused just for her. She leaned against the wall, scanning the edges of the station, hoping she wouldn't spot another shadow lurking. But there it was again. A figure appeared in her peripheral vision, just at the edge of the platform. It was a tall man, wearing a dark coat that blended into the shadows. He didn't seem to notice her at first, but then he turned, his eyes locking onto hers. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She didn't know who he was, but she could tell by his gaze that he knew exactly who she was. Without thinking, she started walking in the opposite direction. She kept her head low and her steps light, but the feeling of being watched intensified with every passing second. The man didn't follow immediately, but Sarah didn't need to see his next move to know that he was after her. Her instincts were screaming at her to run, to escape, but her feet felt glued to the ground. A distant rumble broke the silence. The train was finally arriving. Get on the train. It was the only option she had. She needed to disappear, to blend in with the crowd. She couldn't stay here any longer. With a surge of adrenaline, she sprinted toward the edge of the platform, desperate to make it onto the train before the man could close in on her. As the train slowed to a halt, Sarah slid through the doors just as they opened. She pushed past the few commuters standing near the entrance and hurried down the aisle, trying to blend in. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her breath came in ragged gasps. She had no idea if the man had followed her onto the train, but she wasn't taking any chances. Sarah found an empty seat near the back, tucked away in the shadows. She leaned back against the window, her eyes darting between the other passengers. Everyone seemed oblivious to her presence, absorbed in their phones or conversations. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She glanced down at her phone again. Emma's message still sat unread, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Stay where you are. Don't move until I get there. Trust no one. Sarah's thumb hovered over the screen as she typed a reply. Where are you? What's happening? But before she could hit send, the train jolted, and the lights flickered. The movement was subtle, but Sarah's heart skipped a beat. It was the second time in as many days that something strange had happened at a crucial moment. Something was off. She paused, then slowly pressed send. The train rumbled on, taking her deeper into the unknown, as Sarah wondered if she was being led into a trap. The train's slow and rhythmic motion offered Sarah little comfort as the minutes ticked by. She scanned the faces of the other passengers, but there was nothing of note, just tired commuters lost in their own worlds. Yet, she couldn't help but feel the oppressive weight of danger lurking in the air. The phone buzzed in her hand, and she jumped, startled. She looked at the screen. It was Emma again. Sarah, you don't understand. It's too late for you to turn back. You're already caught in the web. Caught in the web? What was Emma trying to say? The message didn't offer any explanation, no clarity. Sarah's stomach twisted with confusion. She quickly typed a response, but then paused, thinking. What was Emma really trying to tell her? Before Sarah could send her reply, the train screeched to a halt. The abrupt stop threw Sarah forward, and she caught herself against the armrest. The lights flickered again, plunging the train into brief darkness before they returned. The atmosphere in the carriage shifted, something wasn't right. Sarah's skin prickled, and she looked up, searching the shadows. Through the dimly lit train car, a man stepped forward, his features becoming visible as he passed under a light. The same man from the alley. He was here. Her heart raced. The man who had followed her into the metro station was now on the train, and Sarah could feel her pulse quicken with terror. She had no choice but to act. The train was stuck. The doors wouldn't open, and Sarah was trapped in the middle of it. She needed to think fast. She glanced around, looking for an escape. The only exit was at the front of the train, but there was no way to get there without crossing paths with the man. The tension in the train car was suffocating. The other passengers seemed oblivious to what was going on, but Sarah was acutely aware of the man's presence. He was moving through the car slowly, methodically, his eyes scanning the rows of seats. When he finally looked in her direction, she turned her gaze away, pretending to be absorbed in her phone. But her hands were trembling as she typed one more message to Emma. He's here. What do I do now? Before she could hit send, the train jolted again. This time, there was a loud screeching noise, followed by a sudden darkness. The lights came back on after what felt like an eternity, but when Sarah opened her eyes, the world seemed different. The train car was empty. The man was gone. She glanced around in panic. No one else was in sight, and the train was eerily still. She stood up, her legs unsteady. Something wasn't right. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she stood in the abandoned train car, the silence pressing down on her like a heavy weight. The lights had flickered back to life, but something about the atmosphere felt different, almost wrong. The train was no longer moving, and there were no passengers, no sound of the city beyond the station. The soft hum of the train's engine had disappeared entirely. It was as though the world outside had ceased to exist, leaving only the eerie stillness of the carriage. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Where had the man gone? Why had the train stopped? She looked down at her phone again, but it was dead. The screen remained black, offering no comfort, no answers. She had no way of contacting Emma. She felt cut off from everything, trapped in a situation she couldn't control. Sarah's hand instinctively reached for the strap of her bag, and she felt a slight tremor in her fingers. She wasn't sure what she was afraid of more, the eerie stillness of the train or the creeping sense that something far more sinister was at play. There was a truth out there, but she couldn't grasp it, not yet. Her eyes darted around the train car, searching for any sign of movement. The seats were empty, the windows black as night, offering no glimpse of the outside world. She swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat form at the back of her neck. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Emma had warned her time and time again, but Sarah hadn't understood the gravity of the situation until now. Her mind raced with the cryptic warnings she had received: stay where you are. Don't move until I get there. Trust no one. She had trusted Emma, hadn't she? But now, doubt began to settle in her heart. Was Emma truly on her side? Or had she been pulling the strings all along, setting Sarah up for something she wasn't ready to face? The train car groaned, breaking the silence. Sarah's head snapped toward the sound, her eyes widening in fear. The door at the far end of the car slid open slowly. It wasn't the train conductor, it wasn't anyone she recognized. The figure that stepped through the doorway was tall, cloaked in darkness, and moving with a slow, deliberate purpose. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as her heart raced. She knew, without a doubt, that this was the man who had been following her. He was the one responsible for everything. He walked toward her, each step calculated, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. Sarah's instincts kicked in. She didn't have the luxury of time. She needed to get off this train, to escape whatever trap had been set for her. She turned and ran toward the back door, but the man's voice stopped her cold. You can't run from this, Sarah. Her blood ran cold at the sound of her name. How did he know who she was? Sarah spun around to face him. You don't understand, he continued, his voice low and almost mocking. You were never meant to be in control of this situation. You were always going to end up here. Where is here? Sarah demanded, her voice trembling despite her attempt to remain calm. What do you want from me? The man took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a strange sense of familiarity about him, though she couldn't place it. He wasn't someone she recognized, but somehow, he felt like a part of the puzzle she couldn't yet solve. He had the look of someone who knew exactly what was going to happen next, someone who had been pulling the strings from the very beginning. Answers. You want answers? He smiled faintly, his eyes glinting with something that Sarah couldn't quite read. The answers aren't what you think they are. You've been living in a lie, Sarah. And now it's time to wake up. The chill in the air grew thicker as Sarah took a step back, her hand still clutching the strap of her bag. Her mind was a blur. Wake up? What was he talking about? She had no idea what he meant, but she knew she couldn't let him get any closer. She turned on her heel and bolted for the door at the back of the train, but just as her fingers reached the handle, the train lurched. The lights went out again, plunging the carriage into darkness. Panic surged through her as she fumbled with the door handle, her heart racing. Suddenly, the train jolted forward, the screech of the brakes loud in the silence. The wheels rumbled along the tracks, as if the train had started moving again. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she glanced over her shoulder. The man was gone. Had she imagined it? Had he been a figment of her fear, a manifestation of her anxiety? But no. She knew it hadn't been her imagination. He was real, and he had just been here. The train sped up, its motion growing smoother as it picked up speed. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process everything. Where was the train going? Why was it moving again? Why had it stopped in the first place? She turned and ran to the nearest seat. Her legs unsteady beneath her. She grabbed the back of the chair, trying to steady herself. She needed a plan. She couldn't just sit here and wait. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just about her anymore. There were people involved. People who had been watching her, manipulating her, and she was getting closer to finding out why. The train continued its relentless journey, the rattling of the wheels and the occasional flickering of the lights the only sounds in the stillness. Sarah looked out the window, but all she could see was darkness. There was no city, no life beyond the train. She felt like she was trapped in a different world, one that didn't play by the rules of reality she had known. And then, the phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Emma again. "Sarah, I told you this would happen. You're already too deep. You have to trust me now. Don't fight it." The words didn't make sense. They only raised more questions. Too deep? What did Emma know that Sarah didn't? Why couldn't she just tell her what was happening? Why did everything feel so cryptic? Sarah's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she grappled with the implications of Emma's message. Was Emma involved in all of this? Was she working with the man from the train? Or was she really trying to protect Sarah from whatever it was that was closing in on her? As the train continued to barrel down the tracks, Sarah felt a strange sense of finality settle over her. She had crossed some sort of invisible line. There was no going back now. The truth, whatever it was waiting for her at the end of this journey. She just didn't know if she was ready to face it. The air inside the train was stifling. Sarah could feel the sweat running down her spine, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been on this train for what felt like hours, though she had no way of knowing how long it had been. The world outside the train was still a black void, and the only thing keeping her company was the deafening rhythm of the wheels on the tracks. Her mind raced with the messages she had received, the cryptic warnings, and the strange figure who had appeared on the train. Each piece of the puzzle was tangled in her thoughts, and the more she tried to make sense of it, the more impossible it seemed. Everything was leading to this moment, and she was no closer to the truth than when she had first stepped onto the train. She stared at her phone, which had suddenly come to life once again, but the screen was blank except for one new message. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I never wanted this for you. But now, there's no going back." It was from Emma. But why did it sound like a goodbye? Was Emma in danger too? What did she mean by "there's no going back"? Sarah's grip tightened on her phone. She had been trying to trust Emma, trying to hold on to the belief that Emma was trying to protect her. But now, with every passing moment, she wasn't so sure anymore. Was Emma really on her side? Or had she been a part of this from the beginning? Suddenly, the train jolted, snapping her out of her thoughts. The lights flickered, and for a split second, she thought she saw something in the distance through the dark window, a silhouette moving against the light. Her heart leaped into her throat. Was it him again? The man who had been watching her. Before she could react, the train screeched to a halt. The sudden stop threw her off balance, and she staggered, gripping the nearest seat for support. The train was no longer moving, and the lights flickered once more before going out entirely. The only sound now was the pounding of her heart in her ears. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The train car was still, and the air was thick with the oppressive silence. Then, without warning, the door at the far end of the car slid open. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The man stood in the doorway, his figure illuminated by the faint light from outside the train. He was as calm as ever, his eyes fixed on her. But there was something different about him now, something colder, more calculated. The weight of his presence seemed to suffocate the very air around her. Sarah stepped back instinctively, her heart racing. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay strong. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. The tension in the air was palpable, and Sarah could feel her pulse quickening. She had to get out. She had to escape before he got any closer. But it was too late. He was already there. "You still don't understand, do you?" His voice was low and smooth, like honey dripping from his lips. "You think this is all some random twist of fate. But nothing happens by chance. This was always meant to be. What do you want from me?" Sarah demanded, her voice growing stronger now, though her insides were still trembling. The man smiled faintly, his lips curling into a thin, almost sadistic grin. "What I want, is for you to wake up. To see the truth that's been right in front of you all along." Sarah's brow furrowed. "What truth? What are you talking about?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "You've been part of something much bigger than you realize, Sarah. You're not just a bystander in this story. You're at the center of it all. You always have been." She swallowed hard. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of his words. What could he possibly mean? She had been an ordinary woman, living an ordinary life. Or so she had thought. How could she be at the center of some grand plan? And why was he so sure about it? "You're not making any sense," she cried out. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man stepped back, as if he were considering her words. Then, slowly, he spoke again, his tone more serious now. "Do you remember the night you boarded this train, Sarah? Do you remember what happened just before? The man who spoke to you, he was the first piece of the puzzle. He told you about the danger, but you didn't listen. You thought you could outrun it. But that was the moment when everything changed." Sarah's mind spun. She had boarded the train in a daze, barely even processing the events that had led up to it. She had been so focused on getting away, on escaping the life she had been living. But she hadn't thought about what she was leaving behind. And now, it seemed that the very thing she had been trying to escape was catching up with her. "What are you saying?" Sarah whispered. "What do you want from me?" The man took another step forward, his eyes now glowing with a strange intensity. "You're part of a much bigger story, Sarah. You've been chosen for something, whether you want to believe it or not. The events of your life weren't random. They were all leading you to this moment." Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to piece together the fragments of his words. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be part of anything bigger. She just wanted to live her life in peace. But the truth was undeniable. She had been caught in something far more dangerous than she had ever realized. "I didn't ask for any of this," she cried out, her voice rising in desperation. I just want to go home. The man's eyes softened, a glimmer of sympathy crossing his face. But it was gone in an instant. You can't go back, Sarah. Not anymore. You've already crossed the line. There's no turning back from this. Sarah's heart sank. She didn't want to believe him. She didn't want to accept what he was saying. But deep down, she knew he was right. She had already crossed that line, and there was no going back to the life she had known. The man's gaze held hers, unblinking. The truth will come out, Sarah. You'll see it soon enough. You'll understand everything. Sarah didn't know what to say. The words she had been searching for, answers, clarity, seemed just beyond her reach. And as the train began to move again, the reality of her situation sank in. She wasn't in control of this anymore. She wasn't the one calling the shots. The man turned and walked toward the exit of the car, his footsteps echoing in the silence. You'll learn everything you need to know, soon enough. Just remember, trust no one. And then he was gone, leaving Sarah standing there, alone in the dark. Her heart thudded in her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She didn't know what was going to happen next. She didn't know what the truth was. But she knew one thing, this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, it would change everything.